Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Eric Guy. I'd like to give a talk about obesity, diabetes statistics, and pretty much the etiology of obesity. Um, question is, what is obesity? We kind of know it when we see it, and uh, and there are certain characteristics of people when they do have a diabetes, what they tend to eat, and if you see the Coke in the hamburger, that's generally what it is. So don't be surprised if you're eating that if you're a bit overweight. What's the definition? Of obesity. It's an arbitrary number based on the BMI of 30 and above, and overweight is 25 and above. Normal weight is 18.5 and 24.9, and that's really what we strive to get because there's a lot less comorbidity or problems associated with obesity. And I like to say obesity is associated, number one, with diabetes, number two, obstructive sleep apnea, okay, three, psychiatric problems, anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, okay, stigmata associated with it. It's especially pervasive and pernicious. There's a lot of other problems, sexual problems with obesity, and there's liver problems with possible cirrhosis, circulatory problems, along with so many other problems, increased risk of cancer, okay? Who is more obese? Is it Dwayne Johnson or this cartoon character above? It's kind of a trick question because Dwayne Johnson's going to have an elevated BMI. It may even be his BMI because muscle is very dense. It's heavy. Therefore, you can call somebody as obese when if you don't look at their physique, if they're muscular, you can be wrong. This is the side view of most people, the profile, and I'd just like to point out that if for a normal body weight, you pretty much there's a straight line between their chest all the way down to their belly button. And if it's not that, you're pretty much overweight, okay, or obese. Obesity before 1980. Well, it was 1980 that the epidemic of obesity really shot off like a rocket. Prior to that, it was pretty maintained in society. It was, you didn't see it as nearly as much, okay, as nearly as much. And maybe it's because people were more active. They walked around a lot more, less internet, and people had to be more active. And they ate better. They didn't go eat out at restaurants, and there wasn't a lot of what I'm about to show you. What was causing this? What I think was responsible for the obesity epidemic. Okay, but before 1980, it was 15%. Now, the number that was the baseline obesity. It's 15%. What is it today? What do you think? Well, it's a lot higher than 15%. I mean, it's an epidemic for a reason, okay? Because it's much higher than before. Today, it's 35%. There it is, 35%. Remember that. 35% are obese, BMI 30 or above. What is the prevalence of just being overweight? It turns out that 70% of people are overweight. It's not everybody. There's a few genetic freaks out there. Those are the people, they eat whatever they want, okay? And they don't gain weight, okay? But usually these people, if you study them, they're not eating a lot of high fructose corn syrup, okay? And that's another discussion. That's long. You get into that and talk a lot. But here is a graph showing the percentage of obesity with high fructose corn syrup. It took off in 1975 and on because there was a reason for the big businesses to produce high fructose corn syrup. It was just so much cheaper than table sugar. It turns out the table sugar and high fructose corn syrup is basically the same thing. High fructose corn syrup has 55% fructose, 45% glucose, and table sugar is 50-50. Okay, so it's essentially the same thing. All right, but the thing about high fructose corn syrup, I mean, you can't control how much you put in your food like the companies that produce it do. They give you a lot, and pretty much a lot of people are addicted to this stuff. And if you start cooking your own food, um, making your own food, well, you can't, you're not going to be nearly as overweight, and diabetes is much less common. Okay. So the relationship between diabetes and your mean body weight, it goes hand in hand, straight up. Okay. Um, this is 2000, and the prevalence of um, of being overweight was around 7%. It was actually higher than that. Should be higher than that in 2000. I'd have to look at that. It must be in a different unit. Anyway, this right here graph shows that if you're not diabetic and you're not really overweight and you have a normal body weight, if you gain 15 kilograms, that your relative risk of having type 2 diabetes, whether you're a man or a woman, is 6 times higher. Okay. So like the flip of a coin, if you lose that weight, I think you have a good chance of losing your diabetes. And I got to say that I guess the reason I have a passion for this is because I was diagnosed with diabetes about 2 years ago. And so I went and saw the endocrinologist. I got on all the medication that I knew I needed to be on, but she didn't even mention to me to lose weight, start exercising. She just said, take this medication. And that's what I did. But I knew deep down I had to do something about it. But unfortunately, that just advice was not given. And I know, I mean, I'm guilty of this too myself as a doctor, but I've told myself I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to really work on, because I believe this is true. Okay. People can lose their diabetes diagnosis if they lose the weight. Okay. That happens. There's a doctor on the internet, his name is Jason Fung. He wrote a book about it. And I believe you should read that book. And he's a nephrologist, and he's seen great results with people losing weight and their diabetes going away, because basically sugar is inside our body, and it's compact inside our body. And the more sugar we eat, the more insulin, the higher it becomes, the hungrier you get. And when you get hungry, and with insulin production, your body stores it in the form of fat. Okay. So, and then the fatter you are, the higher your insulin need is, the more insulin you have in your body. And it's a vicious cycle, because you get hungry and you store even more fat. So you got to break that cycle. And the way you do it is by eating the right foods. Okay. So this is what happens. He's in a vicious cycle here. And this is a result. It's because of the high fructose corn syrup, I believe, unless he's really adding tons of sugar to his food, and he's not. I'm sure it's just, he's probably eating out, at fast food restaurants. And these are foods that have a lot. Yogurt is number one. That's hard to believe, right? You'd think it's healthy, but no, it has a lot of sugar. Now, if you get Greek yogurt, maybe not. It's a lot healthier for you if it's not a lot of added sugar to it. Applesauce, like that's really high in high fructose corn syrup. I loved it when I was a kid. And so it takes a factory to produce this high fructose corn syrup, so you can't do it unless you're a chemistry geek, and somehow you can do that. But I don't know. My hat's off to you in a way. And if you're if you're that industrious, probably you're not going to be overweight. Anyway, this is the molecule of fructose versus glucose. And that's the molecule of glucose kind of cut off there. But it takes a different enzyme, and that enzyme lives in your liver. Okay. And if you get too much a load of this fructose, it can cause fatty liver. And that has big problems. It can run into cirrhosis, especially if it's NASH, it's non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. And if your liver enzymes are elevated and you don't lose weight, then you can get the cirrhosis. Doesn't mean you will, but there's a chance of it, pretty high. So that's another reason to lose it if you don't want that cirrhosis. I know I don't. So it's a lot more painful to not lose weight than it is to lose weight. I promise you, in the long run. Fat produces inflammation in your body that increases your risk of coronary artery disease, having a heart attack. So here's some statistics from the National Diabetes Statistical Report as per the CDC website. U.S. population with diabetes, 10.2%, 34.2 million. People who are not diagnosed with diabetes is 2.8% of the population. If you add that together, it's 13%. And for non-Hispanic blacks, the prevalence is 16.4%. Here's the biggie. The population with pre-diabetes is like 3 times that with diabetes. It's 34.5%. And if you add this together, it's 47.5%, which is huge. And you need to remember that. I mean, almost 1 out of 2 people have either pre-diabetes or diabetes, or they don't know they have it. So 1 out of 2. So if you're overweight, you better go get your sugar checked. This slide shows that 77.8% of people are diagnosed with diabetes. The ones who are diagnosed have a provider. So that's actually pretty good. That's in the United States. Okay. So most people do have a doctor. However, it's not that either the device is not that great or there's some non-compliance involved, because 24.2% of diabetics are achieving the goal of 150 minutes of leisure time exercise. Leisure time exercise means you go out to exercise at the gym or in your house. It's better to exercise in your house, but you're doing it for the sake of exercise. That's the main goal. Okay, it's not a walk in the park or the exercise you get when you're working. Okay, that doesn't count. It's actually going out to get exercise. It's only a quarter of the people who are doing that, and 77% of people report, if they have diabetes, they report that they're maintaining their weight or losing weight. I wonder, because they're not exercising. 58.4% of patients with diabetes, age 40 to 75, are actually on cholesterol medicines, statin medicines. And this needs to be improved, because if you have diabetes and you're middle-aged, your chance of having your first heart attack is equivalent to somebody who does not have diabetes, who had his first heart attack having his second heart attack, okay? So that means you have coronary artery disease, you need to be on statin medicine, okay? Unless you really cannot tolerate it, but that's the exception rather than the rule. It turns out that 19.2% of patients with diabetes have hemoglobin A1C less than 7, blood pressure less than 140/90, non-HDL cholesterol less than 135, and not smoking. So that's 20%, less than 20% of people meeting that goal. Something needs to give. People, need to do better than that. So in summary, obesity is strongly correlated with high fructose corn syrup and table sugar, but more high fructose corn syrup. 35% of people in the U.S. are obese, 70% are overweight. Almost 1 in 2 people have pre-diabetes, undiagnosed diabetes, or they are diabetic. Although most people receive medical care in the United States, far fewer are receiving adequate medical care. Hope this is a wake-up call, and hope it's educational. And I thank you. And if you enjoyed this and if you learned something, please give me a thumbs up, and I appreciate that. And have a great day.